The story starts, and we see a boy whose life changed completely in a single night. That night, when the whole family was sitting at the dining table, the father, Mark, noticed something unusual. His son, who was always obedient and well-mannered, was refusing to eat. Mark found this strange, and as his curiosity grew, he started feeling something odd about the food. The taste was as if it had been poisoned. Suddenly, he felt excruciating pain in his stomach. Fear was evident in Peter's eyes. His mother, Carol, panicked and immediately tried to call the police. But before she could do anything, Mark vomited black blood, collapsed onto the table, and writhed in agony before taking his last breath. Carol was left in shock, but Peter showed no emotional reaction. He just sat there in silence. Enraged by Mark's painful death, Carol grabbed a long, sharp knife nearby, but she had no idea why her son, Peter, had become so merciless. In reality, he had unknowingly uncovered a secret that had shaken his entire world. That night, when he was trying to sleep, he heard strange noises coming from his bedroom wall. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, but when the same sounds echoed again, he sat up in fear. He pressed his ear against the wall to listen, but suddenly the noises stopped. Summoning his courage, he lightly knocked on the wall. Just then, that strange voice echoed again. Trembling with fear, he ran to his parents' room and told Carol everything. At first, Carol thought he was joking, but when she went near the wall, she didn't find anything unusual. She explained to Peter that it was just his imagination and that he should go to sleep. But the next night, the same thing happened again. This time, not only were there strange noises from inside the wall, but also muffled screams. Peter panicked and started shouting, which made his father, Mark, rush into the room. However, as soon as he opened the door, the noises suddenly stopped. Peter, terrified, said, "There is someone inside the wall." But when his father looked at the wall, it appeared completely normal. Peter spent the entire night awake, haunted by fear. The next day, he seemed very sad, as if he had suffered some injustice. When night fell again, this time, he heard whispering from inside the wall. Peter froze in fear. But unlike before, the voice wasn't scary. It was soft and affectionate, as if a kind woman was speaking to him. In a gentle tone, she asked, "Why are you crying? Has someone troubled you?" After hearing her ask again and again, Peter realized that the girl behind the wall probably didn't want to harm him, so he shared his pain with her. Peter was a quiet and shy child, and some school bullies often took advantage of his innocence. They pushed him, hit him, and made fun of him. Recently, they had even broken the pumpkin hat he had prepared for Halloween. Peter had pleaded with them, but they didn't listen. Out of fear, he never told his parents or teachers about it. Instead, he hid under his blanket at night and cried. The voice from beyond the wall comforted Peter, and he was told, "If someone pushes you, push them back. Don't be afraid. Don't think of yourself as weak." These words started echoing in Peter's mind. The next day at school, he wasn't as scared as before. When the same bully kids started troubling him again, without thinking, he pushed one of them down the stairs. The bully, Brian, was seriously injured, and as a result, Peter's parents were called to the school. Following this incident, Peter was expelled from school. Hearing this, his father was furious. He couldn't believe that his son had resorted to violence, especially since he had always taught him that every problem should be solved through conversation. In anger, he locked Peter in the dark basement, leaving him alone to think about his actions. Terrified by the darkness and loneliness, Peter kept calling out to the girl behind the wall, but this time there was no response. Bored and restless, he began looking around the basement, feeling his way through the darkness. That's when he discovered a hidden door, one that seemed to lead to a secret room. The door was slightly open, and inside there was an old doll. Seeing this, Peter's heart started pounding. He curled up in a corner, silently waiting for his parents to let him out. But 3 days passed, and no one came. On the third day, when his mother finally opened the door, she was smiling strangely. She gave Peter some cake and lovingly asked, "How are you?" But there was no happiness on Peter's face. Ever since he had seen that secret door in the basement, strange doubts had begun creeping into his mind. He started feeling that his parents were hiding something from him, but he couldn't tell anyone about it. When his parents left the room, he went back to the wall and softly began telling the girl everything. The voice from the other side of the wall reassured him and gave him a suggestion. Tears welled up in Peter's eyes, but at the same time, a new hope arose in his heart. He wondered what the girl might look like. Surely she must be very kind and beautiful. Following her advice, he slowly started peeling off the wallpaper from the part of the wall where the voice was coming from. As soon as he saw a small hole behind the wallpaper, he bent down. He peeked through the hole, but what he saw made his heart pound. Someone was inside that dark cavity. At first, it felt like a bad dream to Peter, but slowly he realized that his parents were not who they appeared to be. The voice from behind the wall told him, "Don't think that your parents love you. In reality, they are terrifying monsters. They trapped me inside this wall, and soon it will be your turn." Hearing this, Peter's hair stood on end. He thought about the strange room in the basement and recalled his parents' odd behavior. For the first time, he felt that something was terribly wrong. Terrified, he hid under his blanket. But suddenly, he heard a knock on the door. At first, he asked in a trembling voice, "Mom? Dad? Is that you?" But there was no response from outside. The door slowly creaked open on its own. Standing silently in the corner of the room were his parents, their eyes wide and staring at him with a cold gaze. After that night, Peter's fear grew. He knew that something very bad was about to happen, but he couldn't understand what to do. The next morning, when his mother asked if he had a bad dream, he didn't say anything because he felt that it wasn't a dream, but reality. The voice from behind the wall called him again. "Peter, your parents are dangerous. They have already done terrible things, and now they will make you disappear forever." But Peter still hoped that this wasn't true. So one day when his parents were not at home, he quietly sneaked into the garden and started digging the ground. He wanted to prove that the voice behind the wall was lying. But as he dug deeper, suddenly his shovel hit something solid. He looked closely. It was a skull, a small child's skull. Peter's mind went numb. He didn't know what to do. The thought alone made his entire body tremble. But just then, he heard his mother's voice from behind. Terrified, he quickly buried the skull back in the soil and lied, "I was just looking for pumpkins here." His mother stared at him with an unusual glint in her eyes. Peter felt that she was suspicious. Scared, he ran to his room and curled up in a corner, too afraid to move. That night, when he again heard the whisper behind the wall, he told the whole story. From the other side of the wall, the voice said, "Your parents have killed children before, and you are next." Peter had been raised under strict discipline. He was punished ruthlessly for even the smallest mistakes. But he had never imagined that this house was hiding such a horrifying secret. One day during Halloween, a girl came to Peter's house asking for candy when she heard a faint voice from inside pleading for help. Terrified, she tried to run away. But before she could understand what was happening, Peter's parents caught her and ended her life forever. When Peter discovered the truth, he was horrified. He thought, "If I don't do something, I'll be next." Driven by fear, he devised a plan. At dinner, he mixed rat poison into his parents' food. They had no idea what was coming. His father took the first bite and immediately started feeling strange. Within moments, black blood started oozing from his mouth, and he collapsed to the ground. When Peter's mother saw this, she went mad with rage. She grabbed a large knife and charged at Peter, but just as she tried to catch him, she too began to feel weak. She collapsed right there, coughing up blood. With a pounding heart, Peter pulled a bunch of keys from her pocket and rushed toward the secret room where his sister was imprisoned. He removed an old clock from the wall, revealing a hidden door. With trembling hands, he opened it. But as soon as he did, a chilling laughter echoed from inside. The figure that emerged from behind the wall was no ordinary girl. Her eyes glowed in an unnatural way, and her face was horrifyingly deformed. Meanwhile, outside, a group of school kids had arrived at Peter's house to take revenge on him. They forcefully entered and began wrecking the place, but soon they noticed eerie shadows moving behind the walls. One of them turned around, only to be grabbed by a long, grotesque hand that dragged him into the darkness. The other three tried to run away in fear, but it was too late. Peter's sister was now free, and she was starving. A loud scream from the drawing room sent chills down their spines. When their leader turned around, he saw a rotting corpse inside the cupboard. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. They couldn't understand what was happening. One of them panicked and tried to run, but an unseen force grabbed his leg and dragged him to the ground. Peter, terrified by the horrifying scene, hid under the bed. The remaining kids tried to escape, but something hidden within the walls was hunting them. Just then, a severed head fell from the ceiling. The children were petrified. They screamed, but it was too late. As they desperately tried to escape, a sinister shadow crept up behind them. One of them turned around and saw a decayed hand reaching out. A chilling, raspy laughter echoed through the house. One by one, the entire gang was slaughtered. Only Peter remained, trembling under his bed. But the demon's hunger wasn't satisfied yet. It grabbed Peter and locked him in the same dark basement where it had been imprisoned for years. Now it wanted its own brother to feel the same pain it had endured, to be beaten mercilessly, tortured, and left to rot in the darkness. Just then, there was a knock on the door. It was Peter's school teacher, Miss Devine. She had grown suspicious of his absence from school. As soon as she stepped inside, she saw bloodstains and scattered corpses everywhere. The horrifying sight made her gasp in terror. Just then, he heard Peter's cries for help from the basement. Despite his fear, he gathered courage and went downstairs. But as soon as he stepped into the basement, the demon lunged at him and grabbed his leg. Miss Devine panicked and looked around frantically, but at that moment, the demon hiding within the walls launched a fierce attack. Suddenly, Peter grabbed his sister's long hair and pulled her down with all his strength. Miss Devine quickly picked up an iron rod and struck Peter's sister on the head. She screamed in pain and staggered back. Together, Peter and his teacher managed to trap her back in the basement and shut the door. But the story didn't end there. Ever since Peter had brutally killed his parents, a strange cruelty had taken root within him. He had now become just like his sister, a terrifying demon, slowly growing in the dense darkness. And with this, the story ends here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Also subscribe to this channel for more horror stories like this.